All right. Great morning, my friends. Trying to get it live on Instagram, and we are. Awesome. A little bit of a delay on that, though, so I'm not going to watch that. But welcome. Great morning, my friends. Let's get back to reality here. Great morning. This is your boy, Dr. JC Doornick, and welcome to another edition of the Make Sense with Dr. JC Doornick podcast. We're going to be reviewing a book, but also giving you a little bit of a taste of an upcoming course that I'm creating called Communication Breakdown, of which the guy that wrote this book played a lot in it, Oren Klaff. So we're going to be reviewing and making sense of pitching, but from this book, this amazing book that is very deceiving. If you read the cover and the name of the book, you'll probably go to the wrong place. But in any case, on Mondays, we do this live show, and it's just something that I really, really enjoy doing. And I was just having this thought before I start today, because we'll be together for about 30 minutes. And what you'll hear is the live version of the pre-edit of the podcast of the Make Sense with Dr. JC podcast, because we're in the studio and we're recording right now. So you guys get to see the mistakes and all of that stuff. But I was just thinking, I ask myself very often, I don't know if you do this, and I see some folks joining us, so chime in. And one of the benefits of the live, like Susan just did, is we get to say great morning to Susan Cox. And I finally figured out how to put it up on the screen. Great morning to you, Susan. I was just asking myself this morning why I do this. Why I said to myself, why do you have to do it live? Why don't you just record the podcast? And I realized that, first of all, it's kind of like exposure therapy. If you know my story, I come from a place where I suffered terribly from the anxiety of public speaking and all of that stuff. So I started doing this a long time ago, just exposing myself to that which, I was afraid of. That's where the name The Dragon comes from, is I became the thing that I was afraid of. Let's see another one there. Great morning to you, Lori. Good to see everybody. So once again, if you chime in from whatever platform we're streaming to, and we're on Instagram right now as well. I don't know what will happen after with that video, but it's because it's going to be 30 minutes that we're live here. But if you chime in, we love your live. That's great. So anyway, my point is the answer to my question of when I said, why do I do this? As I hear my dog barking in the background, it's that I've just got to this place where I allow myself to not be sure of something, not be 100% certain of something, and do it anyway. I don't know if you can relate to that, but it's just something I really, really enjoy doing. I love saying, I don't know about this, right? Have I really thought this through, and doing it anyway. I just feel like that's a place I like to live, in the uncomfortable zone. So let's get into this. Once again, this is the Make Sense with Dr. JC Doornick podcast, and I want to welcome you. And I am Dr. JC, aka The Dragon, and we're going to be making sense of pitching today. And this is going to be a summary of this book, Pitch Anything by Oren Klaff. And we're going to do this summary in a way that will hopefully make sense. So just a brief intro. In today's world, if you think about it, ideas are currency. I love that idea. But getting them heard, understood, and accepted requires more than just logic and passion. This is why we need tools and skill sets, and we need to transfer some stuff from these guys. It requires actually control of a conversation's frame. Now, that word control is very, very misunderstanding, and we'll get into that today. But in Pitch Anything, Oren Klaff introduces a method that turns traditional pitching, whatever you think that means, right on its head. Through psychological insights and proven strategies, Klaff teaches us how to pitch effectively by mastering what's called the frame. That's the key today, the key takeaways. We're going to talk about, as I speak about a lot in this course that I'm building, the framework, the energy exchange between two people in a conversation. So the summary that you're about to hear is going to expose the book's most powerful concepts and link it to, of course, the interface response system, which is my personal 4-step strategy to help people level up and upgrade things like this. So we're going to link it to that to tap into the powerful forces of persuasion with an ethical, client-centered nuance in the game of influence. Ethical. You don't have to be devious and mischievous. So about the author quickly, Oren Klaff. Oren Klaff is a seasoned investment banker and sales strategist. I don't know if that gives you a good or a bad taste, but the guy knows what he's talking about when it comes to pitching. He's actually raised over $2 billion by pitching to some of the toughest audiences in high stakes environments. Something I used to get very scared of, but now I get excited about. His methods and strategies blend psychology, neuroeconomics, and storytelling into a structured approach for persuasive communication. We're going to dip into ethical persuasion today. There's many, many books like that. But first, I want to make sure that I welcome everybody to the podcast and let you know a little bit about it. So the Make Sense with Dr. JC podcast covers topics that expand human consciousness and performance. On this podcast, we acknowledge that it's actually who you are that determines how well what you do works, and that perception is a subjective and acquired taste. It's when you change the way that you look at things that the things that you look at begin to change. So I want to welcome everybody to the uprising of the sleepwalking masses. Welcome to the Make Sense with Dr. JC podcast. And as a reminder, this podcast is sponsored in part by the Make Sense Academy, as well as the Make Sense Substack newsletter. Make Sense Academy is our private mastermind and psychological safe haven full of the mindset, tools, mentorship, business coaching, and strategies that help you shift from just simply going through life to growing through life. The Make Sense Substack blog is actually my free publication with a borderline obsessive behavior. I put stuff out in that if you like this kind of stuff. So it's a free publication that brings you a weekly dose of consciousness and perspective. Now, as a support structure, if you level up your subscription and support this show for only $8 a month with the Substack, you'll gain access to all of the future premium content on a more daily basis, as well as some other perks. So welcome to the show. So let's get the big idea about this book and this conversation we're going to have. So every conversation, if you think about it, and I'm just going to invite you to explore a different vantage point. This is what I love the most. By the way, I just want to point out that I'm rocking the Creative Con hat here today. So I'd like to consider myself a social influencer of Creative Con. Is the event of the year in Chicago. Shout out to the Creative Con folks. So every conversation is a battle of frames, and the battle that I'm referring to, the battlefield, lies between the mental structures in a conversation that we define this idea of what's going on here. The person who controls the frame. So this is where it's going to get a little bit sticky for you, especially if you're the kind of person that you're in this space where you think, I don't like to sell to people. This is about communication. This is about helping other people that are stuck and procrastinating and confused, right? So the person who controls the conversation or the frame is the person that is asking questions. And we're going to get into that in a second. So a good way to explain this dynamic, this frame, this energy exchange between two people is to look at a conversation as that, as an energy exchange of curious energy. Think about it when you're talking to somebody, what's happening between you and that person? There's a lot of things going on between you and the person, and determined by who started the conversation and who's on the receiving end, right? So both parties have their sense-making machines on and in full gear, and they're tuned in and are both assessing constantly. That's what the sense-making machine is doing. It's trying to figure things out, but assessing what the other person is up to. What are they driving at? What is this all about? He who controls the frame controls the conversation. This is a powerful thing to understand today in sales and relationship building and your, love and friendships and all of that stuff. So how do you control the frame? By asking curious questions. It's like bouncing a ball back and forth. The ball is bounced with a question. And if you are holding the ball, you're talking too much, right? So you ready to get rid of the ball is by asking a question. So I want to say a great morning to Kathy Mitchell and all of the folks at the Make Sense Academy that are joining us. Once again, if you're watching this on any of the platforms, please chime in, say hi, ask me a question, tell me to screw off, whatever. Just let me know that you see me and care enough to comment. So we're talking about this idea of bouncing the ball back and forth. And in my course, this is a big part of my course. I'm developing and I'm launching soon a course, and this will be available to everybody at Make Sense Academy, but it will also be offered outside as well. It's called Communication Breakdown. And it's a place where I share the science, art, and practice of becoming a master communicator. That's what this is about today. It's not just about pitching your stuff and selling things. It's about mastering the art of communication. And in it, I explain this process that I call uncrossing the arms. It's the uncrossing of the arms. So this refers to that instinctive nature that you have, as well as me, and you might have it rocking right now. We have this nature as humans to kind of like the proverbial arm crossing, right? We're when we're first approached by somebody, we kind of cross our arms, intending to shield ourselves from an unrequested pitch. Do you know what it's like when somebody offers you something that you didn't ask for? Now, if you're sitting down in a restaurant, you don't cross your arms. The waiter comes up and says, "How can I help you?" You're there for that reason. But we live in a world where people are offering us stuff that we didn't ask for all the time. I like to joke, and if somebody comes up to me and tries to sell me something, I look down at my shirt and I ask, like, did it say on my shirt that I was looking for that? So this is what we call the uncrossing of the arms. So if you want to learn how to uncross somebody's arms and invite them to drop that protective shield, that's what it is. In Oren Klaff's book, he talks about this thing called crocodile brain, where we're protecting ourselves from something that we assume is about to happen. So to learn how to uncross their arms and help them drop that protective shield and open up to your offer, you do so by asking, like I say, great questions. About what? What are these questions about? That's right, them. And I call it the who me moment, where the person realizes that the conversation, due to these questions, has just moved into their favorite space and direction, theirs, right? That's what people love to talk about, is themselves. So I want to give you my top 5 takeaways from Pitch Anything. Oop, here it is. And the following takeaways are from the book, but also delivered with my interpretations of them as a small taste of what you're going to get in the Communication Breakdown course. So the first one is frame control. He says frame control is everything. So the person who controls the frame controls the conversation. Imagine that you're in a job interview here for a second. I'm going to give you some examples. The hiring manager, the person that's hiring you, starts with a classic power frame. A power frame would be somebody jumping into this framework and trying to take ownership of it. How? By asking a question. That's what they're doing. They're meaning to attempt at controlling the conversation and putting you in what's called interview mode. Think about it. If you go to an interview, you're there to impress them. This is a very important thing to acknowledge, because you can put anybody in interview mood by asking them a question. They might say something like this. So tell me, why are you a good fit for this job? Now, most people would jump into justifying themselves. Now, Klaff calls this is really cool, this idea of defending and justifying and trying to sell yourself to someone after they ask you a question. He calls that the beta trap. So these are the conversations that you're unsure of, right? So if I start defending myself, who's controlling that conversation? It's you. You asked the question and I'm reacting to it. Why? Because you were being assessed and had no control of the frame. It's a weak spot. That's the one that you come home from and say, I don't know how it went, because all you did was get assessed. So think about how this translates into every conversation. Make sense? But frame control requires a flip of the script, a reframe. So here's a reframe. Instead of defending yourself, you say something like this. Remember, this is about frame control. Before I answer, can I share a quick story about how I solved a similar problem your company is facing right now? I think it'll be more helpful than listening to resume points. So what did I just do? I reframed it by asking a question. Can I do this? And here's why it works. You're not ignoring their question, first of all, by asking a question. You're actually reframing it around what's called a value delivery and what is referred to as a real world action. You're going to give a visual and a real world version of something that's much, much easier for them. Remember, this is how you're going to get the job. Establishing control with subtle authority with the request for permission to share. See how that flips the script, right? That's how you can. So this is a really fun thing to do. If somebody ever asks you a question, you don't want to just ask the same question back to them, but if you ask another question, bounce the ball back to them, then you're going to control the frame for that time. So this is really, really cool. Now, the second one is called the prizing strategy. Remember, these are the top five, I think. The prizing strategy is this. People want what they can't have. Isn't that true? I always want things that I can't have. I'll fight for them, right? That's how I had to get my girl, my chicken. So in sales, this falls under the subtle art of what many people call the takeaway. This being that moment that you indicate that you're not extremely convinced yet or wholly convinced that they are worthy yet of buying your product or doing business with you, or even being your friend or partner. That's what a takeaway would be. So the reason why you would implore a takeaway is because it would incite the scarcity of maybe this is not going to happen, which would make them want it more. Right? I think you guys have all done that before. So here's an example. Let's say you're having some sort of discovery or explore call or some consultation, and the prospective client that you're talking to says something like this. Can you tell me why I should go with you over someone else? That's a pretty common one. So instead of explaining your credentials and all your plaques on the wall, which is what everybody does, flip the dynamic. Here's a reframe. That's a great question. So you see what I'm doing now. I'm going to reclaim control. But before we get there, let's first make sure that this is even the right fit. So you see, that's the little bit of that takeaway there. I only take on clients where I know that I can deliver real transformation. So you see what I did is I just offered value. Why does this work? You're communicating scarcity standards and self-respect. Here's the live. You're communicating scarcity standards and self-respect without being arrogant. Be careful of arrogance. Believe me, that didn't work for me. So this is the subtle power of that takeaway. You're the prize. Remember, this is called prizing strategy. You're the prize. Go into it, whether you're on the receiving or the delivering end, you're the prize, not the service provider or not the service provider that's for hire. And you're serving their outcome, not seeking approval. I teach those that I coach that go into conversations to be confident and assume that everyone would naturally want to do business with you. So you should go into a conversation wondering if they're the right fit. So number 3, intrigue and status. This is another one that he goes over. And this is about hooking them emotionally first. Logic and rationale and all those things come later. Sometimes we get that mixed up. So here's an example. Let's say you're presenting a new idea or a new strategy to somebody, a client or a potential customer that is struggling. So that's somebody that's stating that they're unsure that this is going to work, whether that be a self-belief issue or maybe they're unsure that you are the right fit. That's the scenario. And this could happen even in relationships. Remember something here. If someone is unsure of you, this is important. If somebody exhibits that they're unsure or says that they're unsure, it means that they're in some form of contemplation and they're undecided, right? So this is not a time to hook them, but it makes sense then for you to guide them to a place where they feel safe and secure in working with you. Otherwise, they never will, thus getting them what they desire. And that's results. That's all people care about. People don't care about how smart you are. They want results. Smart is something that validates other things, but people just want to get results. If you could guarantee results in friendship, in love, and that you'll never leave someone, or that your product is going to change their lives, they're in. So instead of launching into some boring data and statistics, lead with intrigue. This is what this is about. So here's the reframe. You mentioned, so this is an indication you've been listening, right? So active listening is an important part of communication. In fact, the most important form of communication is listening. You mentioned before that you have tried everything and your lifestyle seems to make getting healthy and fit nearly impossible for you. Am I right? And their answer will most likely say, that's right, which is kind of like saying amen. Well, not only do I think I can help you, but I actually think that my program was almost, dare I say, made for you or for people like you. And here's why. Here's why this works. This is a really important thing, and that's the reframe. Curiosity is now triggered, right? When you state something that indicates that you're understanding them and you get them, you've got them on the edge of the seats, because very few people do that, right? That's why those two most important words you can ever hear from somebody when you clarify something is they go, that's right. Because that's the moment where they say, he gets me, and whatever it is that he's about to offer me must be special because he gets me. So that's the reframe. That's intrigue. I love that. Number 4, the crocodile brain filter. Oh, this is a good one. People tune out anything boring, complex, too familiar, or mischievous or devious. So the crocodile brain refers to the crossing of the arms, the protective barrier that everybody has before they feel safe. So here's an example of a sales or client pitch. You're pitching a new service to a potential client, and you start with something like this. So here's an actual pitch for those of you offering some sort of service. We offer personalized coaching tailored to your goals. That's white noise to the crocodile brain, right? To that primitive brain. They've been burned before, believe me, and I'm sure you have too. So be smart enough to know that they're feeling that way. They've been burned before and have no reason to trust that you have their best interest in mind yet. This too is why it takes time for people to give themselves into a new relationship or a friendship. I remember when Chicken and I first really fell in love with one another, it was a very scary and vulnerable place to be, right? Because we hadn't been like that in a long time. Same thing happens in business. It's the process of earning somebody's trust. Arms are crossed until otherwise uncrossed. Make sense? So here's the reframe. Most coaches don't realize that they're sabotaging themselves in the first 8 seconds of every conversation with people like you. You want to know why? Want to know how? So what I'm doing is I'm bringing out and speaking right to the pain point. This is how you uncross the arms as well. It delivers intrigue, and it engages part of the brain, or it engages the part of the brain that responds to novelty and danger. It makes them lean in to the conversation instead of mentally checking out, right? Imagine that if you went right to the source of somebody's concern or worry and explained why that typically happens with other people in the first 8 seconds, and say, but here's how it's not going to happen with us, right? So can you see that this also invites that person in that moment, because now you're talking about other people, into a more personal friendship that feels like you are talking about others together, almost like gossip, right? How about these guys? And taking the pressure off of any potential agenda that was assessed between you and them. It's off the table now. So I want to give a disclaimer here, because I know that some people that are listening to this will go to this place. My communication breakdown course, as well as anything like this that I'm sharing with you, and the transfer of all these lessons, in actuality, should be illegal, right? Or at least require a license or some sort of prescription. like drugs. Why? Because in the wrong hands, these things that I'm sharing with you, especially in the course coming out, can easily be used for unethical manipulation of others. Couldn't you see that? That's what somebody would be like, a car salesman, or the quintessential. They're not all like that. Or maybe like a player or something that's picking up girls or guys, right? You can have players on both sides. So in the wrong hands, this could be used the wrong way. You'll notice that some people in your life, and you might be one of them, are just really good at this stuff naturally without even knowing that they are. They're great at making friends and having great influence over others. Something just popped up. So they're great at making friends and having great influence over others. They're influential. Why? They don't even know it. Why is that? Because it's who you are intrinsically that matters, right? We say that who you are determines how well what you do works. So intrinsically, if it's not an act and you actually are authentically concerned and wanting to serve the person, it's okay to want for yourself, but that comes second. If it's authentic, it's going to work and also serve the person. If it's inauthentic, you might manipulate people, but it's not a long-term strategy. You'll burn bridges, you'll be that guy, and also people won't last. People won't get what they want. So your disclaimer is just a reminder that this stuff works best when your intention is centered around serving others and their needs. Make sense? I needed to get that out just so you know that the dragon is not trying to pull the sheets over your eyes. So number 5, avoid being what I mentioned before, the beta trap. Avoid the beta trap. Behavior or beta behavior kills authority and influence. So let's talk about client pushback or somebody that gives you pushback. A client interrupts your proposal and says this, I just don't see how this is going to work for me. So the beta trap that was just set would be you to defend or start over talking. Defend or over talking. So let's talk about a reframe to avoid the beta trap. See, the beta trap is when you start like defending yourself. And I'll show you why that's not a good idea. So here's the reframe. Somebody says something like, I don't think this is going to work out. I don't think this is a good fit for me. You say something like this, fair point, question. Can you tell me more about what it is that's not landing for you? Let's unpack it together. So you see the reframe. Here's why that works. By asking the question, you maintain the frame, right? And you do so with calm curiosity, right? Your intentions and agenda are off the table now. You don't fold or react emotionally. This builds trust, not tension, and it signals high status with emotional intelligence. That's what this is about. Like, it's almost like the idea of saying, I'd love to learn from this. Even if it doesn't happen, I'd love to learn from this. Remember, when you defend yourself, you may think that it's a necessary thing to do, to stand your ground and say, that is not the case. That's not true. However, at that moment, you start defending yourself and fall prey to this beta trap. You've become unconscious to the fact that you're now exposing something that will diminish their trust in you, that it bothered you, that it bothered you. Think about it. Leaving the suspicious curiosity of why it bothered you on the table and screwing up the soup. Make sense? So let's just talk about how we can correlate this stuff in the last few minutes with the interface response system. The interface response system is just this 4-step system of leveling up your consciousness and stepping into this space where you can find more of that logic, rationale, and authenticity. So the interface response system can be used to improve and master your communication skills. It's about understanding how people typically respond at different levels: biological, emotional, cognitive. Those are the different levels. And designing your conversation to meet them where they are, then gently guiding them and their response in the direction of service, understanding, and aligned action. This is a great strategy to improve and increase your sales. By practicing making the sound that we teach in the interface response system as a tool to step into this space where you're going to make better decisions, is to just say, Huh. HMMM. And it means I hear you, but I'm not sure yet. I'm contemplating. This is how you step into the space, and you'll learn this if you come into the Make Sense Academy or when my book comes out. This allows you to step into a more conscious space where you can really listen and understand rather than be understood. If your goal is to be understood, you lose. You lose. You might persuade somebody into something, but they won't stay. Make sense? So here's how the interface response system works in this thing called frame control. So Klaff says, control the frame. That's what he says. So the interface response system will upgrade this frame control through understanding how and why the person is using that current frame. What's going on here? Why are they using that frame? Why did they ask that question? Rather than just robotically, responding. So the application is this: by reading the candidate's posture and energy, you're going to dramatically adjust how you approach the frame. Take a chill, take a pause. Use what's called interface mapping to identify whether your client is responding emotionally, intellectually, or protectively. Now, there's a lot of practice involved in this, but if the person is displaying some sort of cognitive posture, right? They look curious or something, then you're going to respond by using a logical and commonsensical structure to your solutions. Make sense? Let's say they're displaying some sort of emotional posture, right? Maybe they look concerned or worried. Slow things down as a result. These are the little nuances in conversations that you're either naturally good at. And by the way, if you're in an authentic conversation, you'll be naturally good at it. But just express things from a warm place if they're emotionally, rejective. So if they're acting defensive, right? They just seem like, oh, this is not going well. Don't push. Ask questions, create space, and try to de-escalate things with your response. And then just finally, if somebody seems disengaged, like they're just not even like listening to you, interrupt the pattern. Use something that would surprise them or curiosity. Tell a story or something like that. Now, remember something. These are not manipulative skills. You could use them that way. These are ways of helping people get out of the prison of things like procrastination and such. So let's talk about disarming, using the IRS to disarm the crocodile brain. And we're going to do so with what's called attuned messages. So Klaff says, speak to the primitive brain first, right? That's how you get in the first door. Uncross the arms. Speak to the crocodile brain first. Using attuned language patterns that soothe fear responses and create safety. Here's the application of it. The uncrossing of the arms, as I said before, open with curiosity, interest in them, right? And insert passion into understanding their passion. Be curious about what they're passionate about. Use visual metaphors that show that you're actively listening and looking to get them by doing that. So you mean like this? Oh, so what you're saying is kind of like this, right? These are wonderful ways of disarming the crocodile brain. So let's go over a couple more. We're almost there. Ethical prizing, right? We talked about you're the prize, right? You don't want to do this from an arrogant place. So Klaff says you're the prize. So here's how we can upgrade this with the interface response system. Understanding and respecting the client's needs and perspective, and stating that you only work with people that you feel confident that you can help, right? So the first step, only in the space of higher consciousness can you listen, ask questions, and understand their perspective, and then say something like this. This positions you as the prize, and that's the goal. So a common application would be communicate value not through your ego. This is the tough one. Check that at the door, but through service. I don't work with just anyone. I work with those that want to create real change. My strategy is to walk along people. My strategy is to walk along side by side with my clients, never pushing them from behind or pulling them from the front. See, that's how you diffuse. So one more, reframing resistance with curiosity. This is great. Curiosity is a great thing to insert in conversations. Klaff says, use power frames to overcome resistance. Okay. A power frame would be a powerful question. The interface response system levels this up by using curiosity and empathetic questions in the space of consciousness to reframe resistance. So, how's the application going to look here? That's an interesting reaction. Can you help me understand what's behind it? There's the curiosity, right? This holds the frame without triggering defensiveness. Love this stuff. So here are a couple of final thoughts. There'll be more of this stuff in the Substack when I launch it. Pitch Anything is about power, presence, and persuasion. But when filtered through a more conscious version of you, which we access with the interface response system and that lens that you develop with it, it becomes a service-centered conversation strategy. That's what we're looking to do. Not a manipulation-based or an agenda-based strategy, a service-centered conversation strategy. You're still controlling the frame, but you're doing so with empathy, ethics, and an eye towards better outcomes for everyone involved. If you go into a conversation and your primary concern is taking them and their wants, needs, and struggles and making that the centerpiece and main character of the story, you're going to do great. Love and appreciate you. And remember, if you learned something today, give it away. That's how it's going to stay. And we'll see you next time. Bye-bye now.